I want to talk about this Frank Vogel situation because the rumor that he's going to lose his gig because anything other than what's happened with the team, as if it's up to him, is laughable. And that's what I said yesterday on Twitter. Now, there was a report from The Athletic that talked about his departure being imminent, essentially. And then an LA Times article backed that up with a source saying, quote, a bad loss to Utah might have been the final straw, essentially. So we're looking at a Monday night outcome against the Utah Jazz where it's arguably the Lakers' best win of the season. That somehow saved Vogel's job. Well, that feels a very temporary solution because if you're already having sources, again, the sources could be wrong, but it was multiple places, people that are a little more plugged in to the Lakers' day-to-day part of it, that maybe Vogel is, another bad week and the guy is done. That's kind of the way it feels right now. That feels like the safer part of this. And we can also point to the contract where when you get a 1-year tacked on extension after you won an NBA championship, that means the team probably isn't super fired up about you long term. And then on top of that, inside of industry circles, outside of it, anybody with a brain that's been watching the NBA, when Fizdale's added the staff late, you're like, okay, here we go. I mean, the extension tells us everything we need to know. And so the Lakers are, as we sit today, 22-22. They're an 8th seed behind Minnesota. They lose the tiebreaker to them. And my biggest point is even an average Anthony Davis, all right, not this version, that's arguably this season the worst season we've ever had of him in his entire career. And whatever you think of him, when he's healthy, he's really good. And he hasn't been good this year for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because he got bigger, because he got sick of being called soft and a million different things. But Anthony Davis, 4 more wins. Is that delusional for me to suggest? A better Anthony Davis gets you 4 wins, and that would be probably a 5 seed, which I know is not what the Lakers are about. But the reason this whole thing got combustible in the last couple of days is because of a very predictable move. Lakers suck. They get smacked. They're giving up points to all these bad teams. They get destroyed by Denver this weekend. And Magic Johnson tweets out something that's very Magic Johnson. And we'll read that tweet for you. After being blown out by the Nuggets, 133-96, we as at Lakers fans can accept being outplayed, but we deserve more than a lack of effort and no sense of urgency. Owner at Genie Bus, you deserve better. All right, this is one of my favorite things, and it's not even about Magic Johnson. It's my favorite chemistry of content that happens where it's bad thing happens, person with some following goes, this bad thing is bad. I'm going to tweet that it's bad. Applause. I don't get it. Magic even shut down the comments on this one, which was an impressive move in general on this. But I can see it all the time. It's different topics. Sometimes they're worldly topics. And I'll see people with huge followings and they're like, this thing that is bad is bad. And then it's like 10,000 likes and it just magic, content. So then LeBron James is like, wait, I can't have Magic send out a tweet that this is unacceptable. I, too, have to let everybody know. So 21 hours later, LeBron James tweets out, #Laker Nation. I apologize, and I promise we'll be better. Well, they have been 1-0. 1-0 since. So you have the Magic part of this where his connection to the Lakers, which may be as strong as any one player to any NBA franchise in history. And by the way, as a player, I love Magic. I actually think he's a little underrated. 9 finals, I think, in 12 years during his main years. That's an incredible stretch. And he's going up against one of the all-time franchises at their peak with the Celtics in the 80s. So who knows what kind of numbers Magic may have had, again, avoiding one of the all-time greats in that collection of what the Celtics were doing in the 80s. So anyway, the point is like, I get why Magic does it, but I also think it's pointless and he can't help himself. And LeBron, who does have a tendency to, as things are going bad, kind of separating himself, almost like the defensive assignment that's screwed up, and then he looks at the guy on the baseline with his hands out. LeBron, there's almost this protective instinct that he has, because if this thing were to get worse and worse, you'll just see LeBron, may not sit with everybody in one moment to kind of prove some point. I was reading LeBron's quotes about Vogel's future, and it was very specific in that it was never a, hey, I've got Frank and Frank's got me and we're all in this together. It was like, hey, Frank doesn't care about that. We know who he is. He knows who we are. So there's never going to be this 100% full endorsement because, again, I think people are looking at Fizdale going, is this guy actually going to take over? When Frank Vogel was in the health and protocol situation, at the end of December, I thought it was really interesting when Fizdale filled in as the head coach. They had that win against Houston. Fizdale was talking about LeBron playing center. And granted, the Rockets couldn't understand a back cut for like 30 minutes in that game. You would have thought it was Will Chamberlain scoring 100 points. And I'll admit that my sensors kind of went up and I was like, ooh, wait, is he praising LeBron a little bit more than you normally would, knowing that he'd be in line if Vogel were out? So we have all of that out there. But let's get back to what this really is. It's a fucked up roster. Of all the things I get right and all the things I get wrong, one of the things I absolutely nailed before the season started, once they got done signing all of these players with real resumes in this league, despite their age, real resumes, guys that when they look in the mirror, they don't think, you think DeAndre Jordan thinks he's done as a basketball player? Of course not. You think Rondo thinks he's done? I count 14 players that would have thought they would be in the rotation. And that includes Kendrick Nunn, who hasn't played. That's impossible. The first time I started talking to anybody in front offices, 2003, I remember talking with an NBA GM, and I was just asking about roster structure. And he said one of the smartest things, and it's held up, this is indebatable. He's like, look, you got your 8 guys you're going to play normally in a rotation. You got 9 and 10 who could play depending on the matchup, foul trouble, or you're changing things up a little bit. But after 10, guy 11, 12, 13, 14, maybe even 15, they kind of have to know who they are. It can't be young, unproven guy who's desperate for his next contract. It has to be young, unproven guy that's just fired up to get gear from an NBA team, a veteran who knows he's never playing and his career's over. You can't have 14 people that are all wondering where their minutes are and all wondering where their next money is coming from, all right? And so when they put the roster together, even though I was like, okay, I guess they're trying to get flexible. They're trying to do different things with bigs when the rest of the league is going small. But it still doesn't make a ton of sense how they're going to do this. So I thought, you know what? I bet the first couple months, even if everybody had been healthy, and even if Westbrook wasn't a total disaster, if there was some slightly better version of Westbrook, that it would still take him a couple months before he decide, hey, I'm sorry, vet who with all these accolades, you're going to be losing minutes to Austin Reeves because he can shoot and he can defend. Avery Bradley's going to be really important in certain defensive matchups, so he's going to be ahead of some of the other guys. Hey, Melo, you've been really good at knocking down threes. There's going to be some defensive matchups. Maybe we can't handle having you out there against another young wing. All right, so I thought these things would happen. Instead, it's been a disaster beyond that. And 2 of the biggest reasons are, 1, Anthony Davis not being healthy, and when he actually did play was terrible. And then the other part of it is Russell Westbrook, who, again, I don't even know who's left on this part of it, because off the ball, nobody respects him from the other team. He doesn't cut, doesn't set screens. When he actually is with the basketball, you never know what the hell is going to happen. And the last time he was really consistently crushing it, it has to be him in control of everything. That's just never going to happen in this setup. And it was really interesting in that Utah game, right? Because Utah's up late, and Utah's kind of going through their own little weird stretch. And again, they've had kind of missing pieces along the way. But Utah is blowing the lead. The Lakers come all the way back. 10-day Stanley Johnson is crushing. And Westbrook's still not back in the game. And he hadn't been in the game for a long time. And I'm like, man, is Frank going to keep him off the floor? Is he not going to bring him back? Because the right basketball move would have been to not bring Westbrook back in that game. All right, based on the way he's played this year and the way that specific game was playing out. And he kind of brought him back in after a play, because it felt like Vogel was trying to cheat to get however many extra seconds of non-Westbrook basketball, knowing that because of Westbrook's stature and still what his standing is in this league and both with this team, he's like, oh, I still have to kind of bring him back. And when I said you still have to bring him back and people pushing back on me, you don't understand. Let me introduce you to a few entry-level NBA podcasts, because if you can't understand why Westbrook has to come back in the game at that point, even if it's the wrong basketball move, then you don't understand how the NBA infrastructure works. But he's still trying to get away with all these minutes. Now, Westbrook came in. The Lakers won the game because Avery Bradley hit a big 3. Stanley Johnson had a nice play. Westbrook actually brought the ball up with under a minute left, a game clock, up 2 possessions, and he decided to go coast to coast. He got the and one in the layup flex winner. It was completely the wrong move. Even the Lakers announcer was like, no, what are you doing? And yet in that moment, Vogel's probably thinking, do I try to save my job and not bring him back in? And then he's like, wait, do I lose my job? Because if I don't bring him back in, then guys are going to be mad at me for not bringing him back in, even if that night it was the wrong basketball point. So when you add all of this up together, it doesn't seem like Vogel has a great chance of retaining his job unless we think some super unpredictable Lakers run is coming that doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. And the problem with Frank Vogel, and the problem for anybody that ever ends up being the head coach of the Lakers, is that, when it's going bad, it's going bad. Everyone around you knows it. It's going bad better than any single person because you're in charge of the team. But again, the problem is that you're one Magic Johnson tweet away from millions being like, oh, that's right, the bad thing is going bad, and you're going to end up out of a job.